Thank you, Jill. All right, so tonight's theme is the kindness of stories. I'm talking about how I learned about the kindness of the universe in an alleyway in Ogden, Utah. But we got to start a little bit earlier. Back in the early 90s, high tech was the most exciting place to be. And I was particularly in integrated circuit design automation. And it was magical. Magical because even the mildest creativity ended up with evolutionary leaps in technology. But then by the mid-90s, consumerism had crept in and it began to pollute the magic. I remember being at a conference, and for over a week I was visiting with these manufacturers, and they were just giddy with the prospect that rural China now had up to 4 hours of electricity per day. And these rural farmers were sending their wives and daughters to sweatshops so they could buy VCRs and TVs to consume media for those 4 hours. And even before I left the conference, I had booked an unprecedented 2 weeks off. No, 2 months off from work. I wanted to go and just lose myself in nature. Find a way to reground after this gut punch. I was going to ride my bike as far away as I possibly could. So we're going to leap forward. We're now in Utah. I'd been on my bike for about 3 weeks, and I was skinny, but I was strong. I was wrung out, but I felt purified. Every encounter along the way had moved me forward. This immersion in nature and immersion in something pure had pushed me out of this polluted place that I had started from. But it felt like something was coming, like the big one had yet to land. And so by the time I hit Brigham City, I was a little nervous. Now, Brigham City was the first real city I'd been in a long time. And it was polluted, and it was noisy, and there were cars. And I felt confused. And I made it through town, found a dirt road that headed up into the mountain, and ended in a construction site. Gave me a level space for which to set up my tent, and I camped there for the night. I was as close to nature as I could get in the city. Well, the next morning I woke up early, very early, maybe to avoid the construction workers, but it was Sunday. Actually, there was this flock of seagulls chattering and just raising a ruckus that woke me up. It was as if they were trying to remind me of an appointment that they remembered and I had forgotten. And it just shot me out of the campsite with such urgency, I didn't even make breakfast or even take a leak. And I was in Ogden by 7 a.m., but I was hungry and I needed to pee so bad I could hardly ride my bike. But I was in another city, and I couldn't just stop. So I found my way through to an abandoned part of town, and I saw an alleyway that cut through by a burned out building, and it looked deserted. So I thought, well, this is going to have to do. So I jetted into that alleyway, dodged behind the dumpster, relieved myself. And then when I turned around, I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was a man standing right there, blocking me in. "There you are," he said. "I've been looking for you." And then he pointed to the sky. And those same seagulls that were at the construction site were still circling overhead. He said, "Seagulls are shorebirds. They travel between the worlds. They're an auspicious envoy. They told me where to find you." Now, I was still a little nervous because he had this big stick in his back pocket, so that really didn't land. And he noticed that I was kind of a little standoffish, so he pulled the stick out, and it was a flute. He said, "My name is Spirit Walker. I've been up in the mountains at a sacred spot where the crystalline spine of the earth is close to the surface and messages travel far." And then he put the flute to his lips and he played for a couple minutes. And I swear I've never heard a more beautiful sound. And then he looked at me, and his eyes, they were dark, they were piercing, but they were crystalline, like crystal balls, like they saw more than what was happening, like they saw past, present, future. And he looked inside. Now, just before I had left Seattle, I had taken a trip to the market, and along my route from my house to the market was a long row of these abandoned warehouses. And one of the colorful people in my neighborhood, his name is Thundercloud, would sit out on a folding chair in this long expanse of sidewalk. And I loved walking down there because every time I'd see Thundercloud, he would have crazy anecdotes or fantastic wisdom. But on that day, just before I'd left for my trip, he had a kind of a dark demeanor. And as I passed, he looked at me and he said, "Death is all around you." As if he's already claimed a victim. Death is on you like a cloak. Well, while I was there in that alleyway, this guy who had just played the flute, who had just introduced himself as Spirit Walker, looked at me with those piercing eyes and said, "Death is all around you. Death is on you like a cloak," using the exact same words that I'd heard 3 weeks earlier before I left Seattle. So this man scared me deeply, because it felt like he had traveled galaxies, light years to deliver a message, something. And it seemed like he had a wisdom that was deeper than just the human that was standing there. But he continued. He ran his hand along my spine. He said, "That pain in your back is a blockage. If we can free that energy, things will go better for you." Now, I hadn't said 2 words to this guy, and he'd already given me the same words as somebody who I'd met in Seattle 3 weeks earlier. He had scared out of me. And now he told me about this pain in my back that had grown since I'd left Seattle. And as he ran his hand along my spine, about the place where the pain was the sharpest, I felt a zap, like electricity, and tremors shot up and down my spine. Now the pain disappeared, but that trembling stayed. "Ah," he said, "did you feel that?" "No." I said, "With a power like this guy didn't need a stick." But he continued. He said, "You've come here to eat." Now, I didn't tell him I was hungry, but he seemed to know my entire agenda. And he said, "We've got a lot to talk about. The path that you're on has changed. You need to, eat your food, and we're going to talk." And so we did. We sat down, and he said, "You've got work to do with the animals. It's going to be a lot easier to do that up in the mountains." I hadn't told him where I was going. I handed him my map. I was saying, in this heat, it's going to be a lot of extra work to go up into the mountains. I don't have time. It's not on my schedule. He said, "Oh, that's simple. Don't take any food or water or any other extra weight." That's when I knew he was just downright crazy. But he continued, he said, you're a child of the universe. And the universe takes care of those who trust her. And then he said, if you ever feel lost, ask the earth. If you ever need food, you'll be fed. If you need water, you'll get it. I was just a little dazed at this point. Well, he had me stand at that point and he showed me a ritual. He said, now, to talk to the earth, and he gave me some things to do. You do these things and then look into your heart. The earth will put the answer in your heart. Whenever you feel lost or confused, do this and then look into your heart and then follow your heart. So I did that. I did that ritual. He said that a lot though. Follow your heart, follow your heart, follow your heart. He continued on talking, sharing, talking about things that didn't make sense to me at the time, about paths changing, routes, this, that. Well, then it became time to go. He knew it. I sort of felt it. And as he stood, he handed me the flute. He said, this is yours. And a little scared me, said, I don't know how to play. He said, oh, but you do. You've just forgotten. And he handed me the flute and walked away. Well, I was thoroughly confused. I felt like I was 100 feet underwater. So I did what he had showed me. I performed the little ritual. I asked the earth. And then I looked in my heart. In my heart, I pointed my bike to the mountains. Now my head said, this is stupid, but my heart said, this is right. And so I went off into the mountains. And just like Spirit Walker had said, every time I was hungry, people showed up and I was fed. Whenever I needed water, I found springs or people gave me something to drink. And whenever I felt lost, I asked the earth and I was shown more beautiful paths than a map could ever show me. And the rest of my trip was like that. It was magic had returned. Now, sometime later, I returned to Seattle, and my path had changed. Just like Spirit Walker had said, and it was starting to make sense now. While I was gone, I had been laid off from a very secure job. Now, I thought I should go looking for work, but I felt lost. I felt confused, so I stopped and I asked the earth. And I looked inside. Now my head said, this is stupid, but my heart said, wait. And so I waited. And that's when I stepped into the river of time and magic and the kindness of the universe, and I followed that. And it's been rewarding and amazing ever since.